Welcome to the cab operations of the FendtOne cab. For this morning we're going to go through the operations of the tractor part of things, and we'll see how it ties in with lunch if we go through the GPS in the afternoon, or how that'll work out. So to start at the front here, we have our auto park. We see guys struggling with that, so in the center position we're in auto park. Once a tractor is in gear, the parking brake is off, and once you're off the sweep seat, the parking brake is engaged. You can still manually override that there, so in any case of an emergency. We have our left hand forward and reverser, as well as our light preset 1 and 2 here. We have our driving lights, our top and bottom driving lights, which are both capable of high and low beam as well. On the right here we have our wiper controls. See a little bit of struggle there, so the end button here enables our right hand window wiper. Pressed in, it's on, and pressed off, it's off, and that is just 1 speed. Lift up is obviously front window washer, and down is rear wiper on, also only 1 speed, and held down is rear window washer. Once back is to toggle the front wiper once. Now the first stage here, the speed is controlled through this for our different presets. Another toggle forward, the wiper continues at 360, and all the way forward we just do the top 180. So moving across to the side here, up top we have, this tractor is equipped with a second display. This display is identical to our bottom display here, and can be customized and set up to however you wish. It also is able to go up in the roof for some real estate, and can be brought down when in use. Up top we have our infotainment controls for our USB and aux ports there, for any connections up there. So moving to our right hand armrest here, first we got our CVT speed control there, to speed up and slow down. On this we have 2 remotes that are assignable to either way. We have our teach-in here, which we'll go through later to set up in the display, as well as our GPS engage button. These 3 white buttons here are also assignable buttons, so we'll also go through that later on in the display, but those are programmable to whatever you wish to assign there. On the side we have a scroller that changes our our cruise control preset 1 and 2, whatever you are enabled to. On the side we have our guidance steering valve. This turns on the steering valve. It also limits our travel speed to 15.5 miles per hour. We have our foot pedal control switch. Either we control the transmission through the foot pedal or through the joystick. We have our C1 and C2 cruise control presets, our neutral switch, our TMS, and our RPM setting 1 and 2. Moving across we have our 3L joystick. That can also be set up in different ways, which we will touch on a little later. Thing to realize here, these lights are for our 3L joystick. What is set up there, the lights on the joystick, is for our thumb lever on how those things are configured, as well as a forward and reverse switch. Down here we have our stop ISB for our emergency. We also have our diff lock auto and diff lock engage. Then we have 4 white buttons. These are also assignable like these buttons there. We can set them up in the screen to whatever we wish to toggle or enable. Our steering guidance valve, this one is just a repeat of this button here. We have our shortcut for our mirrors. These 2 buttons would be used if we are equipped with front hitch. This tractor is not, it's just with rear hitch. So we have those 2 buttons there, but that would be a repeat there if we had front hitch. This one we can allow the front hitch, or rear hitch, sorry, to go into float. This one here we have our presets for our height of our rear 3-point hitch that we can set up to maintain different heights and also a different amount of presets. Here's our RPM controls as well as our foot pedal cruise control. We have 4 hydraulic fingertips that can be locked out individually or lock all hydraulic functions off. We have our front and rear PTO control. This one is just equipped with a rear PTO. And then we're back to our rear 3-point hitch control, either on fingertip. On dial we can set our presets, as well as there's a button on the end of our console, and that jumps from preset 1 to preset 2. While we're looking at the right hand console, inside here at the back, I'm not sure if it's real visible in there, but that is where we have our USB ports for our data transfer in or out or exporting that information. Up here we have our screen control. We also have our radio control, so turning of the knob also displayed on the screen changes our volume. Side to side is our station, as well as press down is mute. On the climate control, we have side to side is our temperature, or sorry, turning of the knob is temperature, side to side is speed of our fan, as well as press down once enables our auto, and held down for 3 seconds is our defrost, which also can be set up in the display. On our screen control, we have our return or escape. We also have our shortcut to our tractor function, so if pressing that, it brings up our tractor function screen. Next we have our assignment key, so this is also a shortcut to assigning our joysticks. Now the last one here, I'm not sure if it's really clear, but it's the A with the 2 screens. So currently we have a blue mark in the bottom corner of this screen. If pressed, the blue mark now moves to the top of this screen, and this now controls our top screen. If pressed again, the blue mark now moves to our front display, and we can now set up our front display on what we wish to view. Now for the tractor setups in the display. Along the top we have our Bluetooth for our phone connection and setup. We have our GPS page. This is a summary of what system we're running. So this tractor is equipped with a Novatel Smart 7. It tells us our correction source as well as our accuracy and connection status. By scrolling down, here is where we would change our correction source. If selected, if unlocked for RTK, this is where we would switch it over to RTK, and RTK would show up further down the page here for our cell service as well as our credentials for our RTK subscription. Here we have our NEMA settings. This is where we would transfer data from our GPS screen to a third-party screen, let's say for a GPS, let's say our Planter 2020 display. We would simply go in the wrench, select our baud rate, which would be determined by the display we're sending it to, as well as our data format and the transfer rate. And to enable that, we would have to select in the top right corner here. On the bottom we have our satellite receiver again, the authorization level, and most importantly our serial number. So this is where we would call, if you call in for a new subscription or unlocks of any sort for GPS, we would ask you for that serial number there. We have our climate control shortcut there. Next we have our Fendt emblem. So our Fendt emblem has a couple roles. If we are at any point in the display, wherever we may be, and we touch the Fendt emblem, it brings us back to our home screen. As well as sliding down from the top displays our codes, active or stored, and a description of the codes and the occurrence of what is happening. Our last settings here is our work profile. So highly recommend setting this up for the different implement types you have. Also, when you start the tractor at the beginning, this is a screen that is displayed where we select our profile. So most guys will select the last settings if just doing casual work. You can also set up different profiles for implement types or setups you have. So here we have a mower and a planter. We'll quickly run through creating one here for a minute. This ties all assignments and whatever functions you have set up to that profile. This may be your remotes, your GPS, implement type. So with selected mower, it configures the tractor how we have last left it with the mower. And our planter, if we select that, it goes for the planter as well, loads the GPS implement that we have set up for that. If I hit the plus button here, let's say I want to make a cultivator. I hit the check mark. Now it asks me if I want to create a second mode for the new work profile for cultivator. For showing purposes, I'm going to say yes, but that is where you can have two setups under one implement. Now we are currently set up under the cultivator implement. I can go in there. It shows us how we have it configured and set up, as well as our A and B profile. So this is where we selected a second mode. We can load our B mode, let's say potentially our road mode or whatever we have. We could select our B and load that. Also important here, if you make any changes to your profile throughout the day, or on the first setup you decide that you want your red remote in a different spot or different flow rates, you would have to go in here and hit the save for the cultivator mode B or A, vice versa, whatever you may be doing. Next we have our user settings. Here we can change users, create users for different people and preferences. That controls just your lighting, your sound, and those sort of things. Up top we have our shortcut to our fields. So this is where all our fields that we have entered would show up, as well as how we like to arrange them. We can create a new field here. This auto button here, this is if you have a boundary on the field. Once driven into the boundary, it'll pop up asking us if you'd like to make the field the active field, and we could select yes. Along the bottom here, we have our cruise control speed 1, 2, as well as our foot pedal cruise control, our presets for our engine RPMs, and our fuel usage. So to start running through the tractor functions, at the top here we have the 3 lines. We can log out of our profile for our user, as well as I think this help page is also very useful. We can go in here and any questions, any issue. This is our operator's manual on the page. We can go in and see how to use, for instance, our implement onboard counter. We can also go under our maintenance, and anything here we can view as well. So let's say we replace the filter, we have any questions, the information, the location of it, as well as how to do it, and some of the procedures will all be show up here. So very useful page. System setup. Our system setup brings us to our general setup of the display, our time, as well as our imperial or metric system, and that all gets changed further down the page. We have our GPS page here, which we ran through, is also a shortcut of this one. Our connectivity page is our data transfer page. Here we can import or export data. Our steering page, we can change the steering sensitivity as well as our wayline catch-up, which is how quickly the tractor reacts to engaging onto the line. We have our isobus display set up. We can see that it is all checked off and enabled here. We can turn the terminal on or off. Also how it is set up. So here we see our task management. So if we select that, it brings us down to where we can change it. This changes how our task is stored. We can book the task when we leave the field. We can pause or start the center which we went through, our system setup. Now we're on the overview manager. So the overview manager displays our screens of how we set them up and how they're configured. We can assign different functions, what information we want to see, and this can also be done for the top display. So very straightforward touch of a button. I can select my map and I can assign it here, and I can make the page as big as I want by just adding different segments. So that's how we configure our home run page, as well as toggling through the 4 different pages that we have to set up. Next up, we have our tractor functions. This is where we would make changes to the tractor for our hydraulics, engine, whatever we may have. So we'll briefly run through each of these. So starting up top here, we have our engine and transmission. We can change our cruise control setting 1 and 2 there. We have our engine speed memory for our presets 1 and 2. Our memo is the speed at which from going forward to reverse is memorized. So let's say I'm going forward 10 miles an hour and I cycle to reverse. It's automatically going to go to that 2.7, not 10 mile forward to 10 mile reverse. So, and from there we can make our changes how we like. Our TMS, this here we can set our RPMs for each function. So let's say I enable my hydraulics and I move this up to, let's say, 1000 RPM. Now when I trigger any hydraulic, the engine automatically revs up to 1000 RPM. We can set that for our hitches, our PTO, anything along those lines. Here we have our reversible fan. We can set a timer at how long it goes and when it goes. We have our load limit control here, often left on auto. You can manually set the limit. This is the ratio of the transmission load on the engine. Next up we have our hydraulics. So here we can label our remotes. We can set a timer and also our gallons per minute, which is displayed by these numbers here. On the bottom we can set the responsiveness of the remote. So this one here, when triggered, it automatically goes to the gallons a minute it was set at. If here, it's more a gradual up to the gallons per minute. We have our priority, and we can also lock out the remote. On this side here, we assign which remote is controlled by the rear fender switch. This gear setting here is our valve modular setting. When enabled, and go back a screen, this function is available. Here we can set how our fingertip reacts and what detents it's on. So if we want our timer to instantly engage, or it engages at the detent or float, that's all able to be set up there. Next up we have our teach-in. So our teach-in is controlled by these switches on our joystick. We can go in, set up for remotes or engage, whatever it may be, all on one switch. We can select the sequence 1, 2, 3, or 4. If we go in there, we can manually set up what we want to be triggered and how it's triggered. Or we can just program it through our operation. So let's say sequence 1, I start to record here, and then I make my changes and it'll pop in the sequence as we're going. So I can do that along for sequence 2. So let's say I just want to record it, I hit the bottom. It's starting to record, and any changes I make will start to be recorded and will be saved at the end, and we can use them all for different triggers and how it's set up.
There we go.
Next we have our hitch and PTO control. Here we can set our different presets, which we said was controlled either jumping to different presets by the end of this console, or a press of the remote all the way down changes which preset we are set on. We have our PTO selection. When we enable our PTO, this is where we enable our stationary mode. So if we leave the cab, that it stays running, as well as our auto. So when this is enabled, our PTO is now operatable through our teach-in. Our end turns the PTO off, and our go will turn the PTO on. Next is our lights. We have our 1 and 2 preset here, and also is programmable and be able to save that there. Our mirror adjustments are done there. Our suspension is controlled through here. It gives us a percentage at what we're sitting at and can be changed through these buttons, as well as locked out up top. We have our loader controls. Here we could unlock and lock our bucket if equipped, and also our soft drive is enabled here, and at which speed the soft drive turns on. Next up, we got our climate control here. Here's our infotainment system. It can be muted, the settings we got there, and our presets, as well as the source we have for Bluetooth, USB, or our aux ports. Our phone connection here. This one is our joystick assignment place. Here we can unlock it, and those white buttons we were talking about earlier, we can assign different functions. So for instance, I select my lights, I select my beacon, and I can put that on that switch there. I can also enable my GPS through different buttons here, as well as toggle through how we have them set up. This is for our 3L joystick. These were the 3 buttons that we could assign on our side console. And here is our valve setup. We can assign different colors at different fingertips. And we're back at our home screen here. Next we got our camera. We have our field GPS setup and our task controller. We were hoping to end with that later, so we'll just leave those 2 as they are. Our universal terminal for ISOBUS here. This is where our ISOBUS would be displayed, as well as going over to our setup of our ISOBUS is also on that page. Our fuel and calculator. Next we have our implement setup. Currently we have a cultivator. We can go in here and edit that. Right now we are going to make a new implement. So we would go up to the top here, hit the plus. This one we will call a mower. It gives us our measurements as well as our connection. So we'll select a rear drawbar. Here is our center line distance. So that's from the outside of the implement to the center. That's also where we would put our offset for the implement. This is our implement working width. This one on the bottom here is our application point. So this would be where your work point is, or for instance your seed point. At the top, that one is our pivot point. So that's where either our rear axle or our axles on the implement would be. We select if it's a steering or a rigid axle. And on the bottom here we have our trigger for our coverage. We can select a switch either from an implement or external switch. Our coverage can be off of our auto when engaged auto steer, PTO, rear hitch, or we can select a remote. So here we would select a remote start. We'd select the color we want it to be, as well as what starts and what stops. So for this instant, minus will start, plus will stop our coverage. Now that we have our mower implement selected, up here it gives us an overview of our implement, as well as we can change the offset for the implement, or our coverage, overlap of our implement. So that's our implement manager. Lastly here we have our diagnostics. Here we can go through our different calibrations, and orange means not calibrated, white is calibrated. Now there's a question in the room with the Massey's there for your guidance offset. We touched on how to offset the implement. Now you can also do the guidance mounting offset for the tractor, so your track on track. Here we can set it to 0. This will tell us if we have an offset in there, or we can go in and it runs us through the calibration offset for the tractor. The top here we have the summary of our diagnostics, the oil level. This would be where we do our regen. And at the bottom here we have our software version. So I know there were some issues with the WAS for the AG 382s and 482 Trimbles. This is where we would see our software version. So anybody prior to F06 would need a software update to run on WAS this year. Anything later than that, F06 or F08 is able to run on WAS. The rest here is self-explanatory, our service reminder, our GPS overview page for the different functions and if their connection, and if it's talking back and forth, along with our brakes and our isobus display there. We can go here for our active codes or stored codes, and the data is for the dealer diagnostics. So I think that kind of wraps up our tractor functions and setup. We had our mower, our cultivator, so last time we created the mower. So we'll just select that here. We have our A and B profile that we can select as well. So if I tap my A, it loads my A profile. So now we're going to run through the GPS setup. We'll do a boundary, a contouring way line, as well as a AB line. So if I go into my GPS run page here, I have my settings tab down in the bottom. Here it gives me an overview of my field, my boundary, my line, but also down here I have my coverage. So any guys from previous years or coverage from before or last year, I can go in there and delete that coverage. It pulls in up this page. I can delete the worked area for our field, our lines, or I can delete all the coverage for all of our fields. This does not delete your field, but just the coverage, the painted area. I have our steering setup here as well. Our headland turnaround. And some of the settings here for our GPS page. Our drop box, we can set up on a timer that it disappears after 5 seconds or when it's there. And that would be this drop box here. So we'll go ahead and create a line. we'll just get straightened out here. One second here. We just had our GPS cut out here because of our steering joystick. We're just going to do a key cycle. Alright, we're back online, so we'll go in here, select our cultivator. So we'll load our profile. We'll go over to our GPS page. Shit, let's go with that code. Oh, looks like we got a faulty steering valve here. Yeah, so we'll just jump over to the 939 we had here. Alright, so we'll quickly run through. I just selected my last settings work profile. I'll quickly run through to make sure we have an implement. So if I go into my implement page, I'll create a new implement. We'll do the cultivator again. We'll set our widths here, as well as our connection point. Our application point down here we'll set to 3 meters, and our pivot point will be 2 meters. Our trigger will do the same as last time, so we'll do it over a remote. We'll select the red remote, and minus will be our start and plus will be our stop. Okay, so now we're in our GPS run page. If you were to get to the field, let's say it's a new field, you would hit the plus icon here. We'll call this one the home. It's going to ask us if we want to create a task. We'll assign a task to this job to calculate our acres and our fuel and those things. So we hit the plus button. We'll call this cultivating. I'll select that task and I'll hit the green check mark. So now I see my home field is here. Up here it tells me I have a task going, that green little dot in the corner of our notepad. Now I'm going to create a boundary. So I'll select my boundary page. Here I can record a boundary off my steering. I can delete a boundary or my worked area. So we'll do the worked area. It'll ask us what side we would like to record the boundary. For the direction we're going, we're going to record off the left side. I'm also going to make a contouring way line for my headland pass. So my second pass around, I'll have a GPS steering. This is all our different way lines we can select. We have our AB, A+ angle, our contour and adaptive contour, as well as a manual or a pivot. So we'll do the contour, and I will enable both of those here. So since I triggered my red remote, I'm starting to make my boundary on the outside. In the center, I am making my contouring way line here. So I'll just make my way, let's say, around the field. Once I meet back up at the part where I started, it's going to ask me if I want to close my boundary. So it says you have reached the end. Do you want to close the boundary and stop recording? I'll hit yes. It tells me the area, the length, and a drawing of my boundary along with the field that it will be assigned to. I'll also stop my contouring way line here. It'll save it. This page comes up, so I can label my way line. If I would like to call this one headland. The field it's assigned to, I can delete it. I can save it and use it to steer now, or I can save it and use it later. So I will save it and use it now. And now since we're in a very small boundary area, it doesn't do the justice of our picture, but that's how we would create a contouring way line. Now if I were to engage on my contouring way line, let's say I'm doing my headland pass still, and on the straight side of the field I want to drop an AB, I can do that while doing my contouring way line. So I'll just go into this one here for my lines. I'll create an AB line. I'll drop my A. And I'll drop my B. Note how this is the same page that pulls up for this way line, the field that it's assigned to. I can label this as my east side. Now here, if I was still doing my headland, I would just save it because I want to use it later. I still want to use my contour, so I would just hit the save. I can do the contour, finish off my headlands. Now I can go into here where all my lines are stored. I have my headland and my east side. So my headland is my contour. I also have my east side that I just created as an AB. So let's say I were to load that now. Now my AB is what is loaded. Also another neat feature for sharing lines between implements. Let's say I have another guy that comes and joins me in the field for cultivating or tanking manure, whatever it may be. I go into my settings. Here it shows me my lines, my boundaries, and my field. I can go under this eye icon, and here's my coordinates for my A and B point, as well as the heading number. So let's say a coworker comes in with the same setup tractor, is doing the same job. You can send him this heading number, and you would go into this page here, and now you would do an A+ angle. You'd hit the check mark and you type in that heading number there, and it would drop the point wherever you may be. So let's say that's the heading number I sent him. I would hit the check mark. I line up with the end of his pass or with his pass, and I can drop my A, and there I have a line. So let's say I save it and I steer. Now that is the way line that I shared with him. So you can transfer that information from one tractor to the next and be on the same guidance lines. The bottom here, we can look at our efficiency, our acres an hour. This one here is our calculator, our onboard calculator, as well as our worked area that is initiated with that task document that we made, or the work remaining area. So the remaining area goes off of your boundary of what you have not covered yet. So at the bottom here, it gives us this one's in hectares, and that can get switched around there. On the right side here, we have our marker. We can draw an area, a line, or drop a marker wherever we want, as well as label the marker here. So let's say we have a tile blowout here. We can label that, and it drops on there and is labeled on the map. On the right hand side here, we have our line nudging. So it pulls up this page here. This tells us our total offset. Here we can reset it to the original line. Here we can center the line. And here we make the changes of which way we want to go. So let's say, this is in meters, but I know some guys, let's say you have a corn planter that you also do 15-inch with a 30-inch corn planter, and you want to do a second pass over top. So you want to move the line 15 inches over, or whatever it may be. This one's in meters, but let's say I just do 2 meters. Now I select to go to the left or to the right. So if I go 2 meters to the left here, it moves my line over. I can also save that line. So I can label this as my bean planter pass. And I would use that line. Now if I go back into here, I have my A+ angle line, my east side that we did, our headland, and also my bean pass. So the east side headland is the AB that we made. We moved it over 2 meters, and we labeled that as our bean pass. So it stores all our lines in here, and you can delete them as necessary as well. Other than that, I think that covers the basic setup of the GPS screen. I'm not sure if there's any questions or comments you want to make. I think with that, we'll turn it over to Robert.
There.
Say that again.
Go ahead, Robert.